Okay, so I come from a humble Jewish household, very traditional, and that meant that my parents had we weren't religious, but they had very fixed ideas about who I should be a friend with, who I should marry, what job I should take, and that I should go to university. And I didn't even realize what a closed world this was to me until I began to get a feeling that something wasn't right. Well, the other thing is that they decided that I should be an optician. Now, why should I be an optician? Well, my grandparents, my grandfather was called Percy, his brother was my uncle Sidney, and they were both tap dancers, and in the tap dancing way, they danced with the great escapologist Houdini in the East End, but they also were inventors. Now, some of you may have spectacles. I don't actually have them. I have spectacles, obviously, but they had the little wiggly things here, and these are called, and I'm sure you all know this, Facey Fit nose pads. Now, Facey Fit nose pads, not a joke actually, Facey Fit nose pads were invented by my grandfather and my uncle, and they had the patent for these. And they made loads of money, but unfortunately their factory, which was in Gray's Inn Road in London, was bombed during the war, and they weren't insured, and they lost most of their money. But they just carried on in the spectacle trade. And then it became the next generation, and then onwards, always had to go into the family business. Now, in a way that's lucky, because had I been into the tap dancing business, I wouldn't have done very well because I'm a hopeless dancer and I've got 2 left feet. But I didn't want to be an optician either. And as I grew older, it began to dawn on me that somehow this wasn't going to work. My father took me to what is now called City University, which was the place that I was going to go to university to study optics. And the professor took me round and he showed me all the inventions my grandfather had made. And then he said, but the thing is, it's contact lenses these days. And then I started to faint. And my subconscious had done a very clever thing. It had actually made me faint at the idea of contact lenses. So I had to say to my father, Dad, I'm sorry, I can't be an optician. He was heartbroken, and he sold the family business, and he carried on being an optician. But I'd also had to go to university, right? So I had to decide what to do. So I have a sort of, and this is one of the things that I think a lot of you have, you can see the future. You can see the way things are going. And I saw that computers were the thing. So I enrolled on one of the first computer science courses in the UK at Manchester University. And I also didn't want my parents, because they were kind of clingy, I didn't want them to be taking too much of my life. I wanted to be independent. So I actually got a scholarship from something called the Electricity Council, which was at Quango, and they paid a salary for me to go to university. And I was the only student with a car, so I could use the lecturer's car park. So, and I had the salary, but I had to work for them for 3 years afterwards, and it was the most boring job I've ever had in my entire life. My main thing was to predict things like birds flying into electricity cables and bringing down the electricity supply system. In those days you had punch cards. They would be sent to the University of London to the computer. There were only about 4 computers in the UK. The results would come back at the evening, then I'd change the cards, which left me with 6 hours of an 8-hour day to fill. Now I worked next to the Tate Gallery, so I used to go in there. I'm a great expert on modern art, I can tell you. And I also had arguments with the guy in the office called Ed, who was into politics. And there was a staff canteen, a chess club, all sorts of things. So I managed to fill the 6 hours a day that I didn't have to work. But it was very soul destroying, and I had to work for 3 years. And at university, fortunately in a way, I had nearly failed my first year exams. And at university, I realized that I didn't want to go the same way as my mother. My mother had mental illness her whole life. So this was very significant to me, and I didn't want to go in the same direction. So in one of the very first coincidences, which I think is one of the themes of being authentic, that you look in your life and you see things that have happened to you that have led you in a new direction. And the more that you're open to those, the more that life will take you in a certain direction. And I've noticed, and it comes out in the book, that everybody that I interviewed in the book had something, some funny thing that happened to them that they weren't expecting, and it changed their life. Well, the first thing that happened to me was that at the university, the Jewish chaplain there was a guy called Alan, And Alan was the son of a rabbi who was my rabbi in Stamford Hill, where I was brought up. And he knew of my family history. So he heard I nearly failed my exams, and he suggested that I learn transcendental meditation, which was back in 1975, when the idea of meditation and mindfulness was simply not out there. So I learned that, and it transformed my life, and it has transformed my life ever since. And I did so well in my second and third year exams that my tutor asked my exam results to be remarked, because she didn't believe I could have done so well. So it's the only time I could have heard of a student being marked because he did done so well, but I had done that well. So I'd come out of university, I'd gone into the Electricity Council, I had to do 3 years, and I decided that I would become a transcendental meditation teacher at the end of the 3 years. So my ex-wife and I enrolled on a 4-month meditation course, and on that 4-month meditation course I began to, if I say hear voices, then you're going to lock me up, so I'm not going to say that. It was a sort of a feeling I had that I had to go into business. Now, I had no background in business whatsoever, and I didn't know where this was coming from. And it was only years later that I looked at the family history and realized that I could be an inventor. I could think of things for the future. So I went into the computer science profession, as it were, became a programmer, went on the meditation course, got this calling to go into business. I didn't know what to do. So then we get to the next coincidence, which was that I went to see a headhunter, and he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, I made something up. I said, I want to be into computers and media, and it's the future thing. And I want to live abroad. I want to live in Amsterdam or Canada. It's quite specific. And he looked at me, he said, "I can't believe I'm hearing this. I've just written up the job for you." I said, "What's the job?" He said, "You've got to go around the corner to 17 Lincoln's Inn Fields. You've got to meet a guy called George, and he'll tell you about it." So I go to 17 Lincoln's Inn Fields. There's a tall guy, pinstripe suit, moustache, army-looking guy. Takes my hand, shakes it, says, "Are you a Mason?" And I kind of thought he'd know from the handshake that I wasn't a Mason, but I said, "No, I'm not a Mason." And he said, "I'll sort that out." But he didn't, he honestly didn't. But he said, "Tell me what you've just told the headhunter." I told him. He said, "We have the job for you. We're selling Prestel software." Now, Prestel was the forerunner of the internet. At one end of, there's a black box, one end to a computer system, and the other one, the phone line, and the other one to a television set. And you could interact using this Prestel technology. British Telecom had the rights to the Prestel system, and this company had been set up in order to sell it abroad. And I was supposed to report to a guy called Keith, working out of the Amsterdam office, to sell it. Well, anyway, the day that I was going to Amsterdam, they got me a flat, by the way, here. He said, "It's £30,000 a year. Is that all right?" This was 1978. £30,000 a year, company car, flat in Amsterdam, and you'll be working out of British embassies. So I thought, well, I might as well. And so my ex and I went to Amsterdam, and as we were going there, I got a call from George that Keith had resigned. So I was running the whole of Europe. And how did that work? That worked because I would phone up the ambassador for each of the embassies in Europe, and he would expect my call. He'd give me an office, and he would arrange for a cocktail party. And by the way, I'm not making any of this up. This is what happened, I swear to you. He arranged for a cocktail party, and he'd invite all the prospective clients, and I would sell to them. And I learnt then that it was just a question of rapport, because it really didn't matter what I had to sell. They just liked me, God knows why. And so I did very well. Now, it never occurred to me as a job in like this, working out British embassies. But years later, in Destiny, I ended up working for the family of John le Carré, for a company called the Ink Factory, which made the Night Manager, which you may have seen on TV. And I was at a tea party. There were scones, actually, and Stephen Cornwall, the son of John le Carré, I was chatting to him, and I'd been approached by someone who'd worked with me, a protege of mine, in this company in Amsterdam, a guy called Bernard Lunn. I was talking to Stephen Cornwall, the son of John le Carré, and I was telling him about this. It's a bit odd, Bernard Lunn, and he said, "Bernard Lunn, is that the son of Peter Lunn?" I said, "Who's Peter Lunn?" And Peter Lunn was the model for Smiley in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which is John le Carré's best known novel. So, and Stephen Cornwall said to me, well, it probably was a front for MI6, because they set up shell companies round, and it's to get intelligence. Well, this was Prestel. This was a two-way system. We put it into the Italian state news agency and other news agencies. So hey Prestel, it's a good one. Hey presto, there was a system that was doing two-way communications and getting news gathering. So I'll never know whether I was a spy for MI6 or not, but I might have been. Anyway, my ex got pregnant and we were in Amsterdam. She wanted to come home. So I got a job for a market research company. I knew nothing about market research. In fact, I've known nothing about anything I've done. But my boss, called John, said to me, there's only one thing you have to know about market research. You find out what the customer wants and you make sure the results tell him that. So, and that did me very well. We did two things there. We looked at, first of all, we had the first on-air television two-way program. It was called the Fame Game, and we put this Prestel technology into 1,000 homes around the country, and we had 200 in the audience as well. And my job was to go and oversee this program at Granada Television. And then the other thing we did is he was telling me about this research project called Acorn, and Acorn was a way of plotting the take up the demographics of any street in the UK, and the cable TV industry was just starting. And so I thought this was an entrepreneurial idea. I thought that we could plot the potential take up of any city or streets within the UK and sell that research to companies that were bidding for cable TV franchises. There was no cable TV then, and so we cleaned up. We did very well. But then one day it all came to an end over a fridge, and the fridge was as follows. My boss, John, had a fridge, and he also had a villa in Italy. The two things normally go together. And he said to me, do you want to go to Italy and stay in my apartment? And the only thing I asked is, I don't want money, but you have to close the fridge door. So we went, and when we got there were two fridges, one with the door open and one with the door closed. So I did what any normal person would do. There was no mobile phone, there was no landline, so I left the fridges as I found them, one door open and one door closed. And when I got back, I told John, and he went completely ballistic, and I got so upset with him. But the next day I did the only logical thing I could do, and that is to resign. And I said to him, I'll carry on with the Granada program, but I really can't take this. And then we were actually still good friends despite all that. But then it left me with the first thing that got me into my own business, which is, what on earth am I going to do now? I had two young kids, and I didn't have a job, so I thought but I had been asked to sit on the board of Windsor Television. Now Windsor was one of the first TV cable franchises, and they bought my research. So I was sitting on the board of their company at a very young age, and so I thought the logical thing to do now is to form a cable TV franchise. And I lived in Camden, and I thought, well, that'll be a nice thing to do. So remember, I had no business experience. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. So I put an advert in the local paper and asked for people to join my board. And I got all these old geezers, and yes. And but nevertheless, we managed to get quite a nice group of people who were seasoned business people, because I thought that's what you really needed. And then I approached companies like Logic and Cable and Wireless, and a construction company called McNicholas Construction. I got money to bid for the franchise. Well, the long and the short of it is we managed to get 5 London boroughs, and that company called Cable London became part of Virgin Media. But it was very, very boring. And it was all about digging up roads and getting what are called wayleaves to dig up the roads, and that was extremely boring. So I decided that I needed another company, and in that company I decided I wanted to make lots of money as fast as I could, because I had a young family and I needed the money. So I started a thing called Broad System, which started the whole idea of TV interaction. So all the things like Pop Idol and so on and so forth were all because of this original company, and we cleaned up and we did money. Now that's when I started to look at authentic business. I wanted a company that actually had the same values as I would give my family, so it's like a family business, but I treat the staff and my competitors even, as if they were family members. And I had a meditation room in the business, not that anybody used it but me, but I also would take the staff and their families on holidays together. It was all great, and we were making so much money that it really didn't matter. But then everybody realized what we were doing, and so soon we had loads of competitors and our margins were going down, and I realized I needed to sell the business very fast. We had £4,000 in the bank and negative equity. We had our mortgage was worth more than our house. So we did, again, what any logical person would do. In India, there were these what are called pundits. They're like priests, and they actually chant for you. And they do what are called ceremonies called yagyas, and this is part of the meditation organisation. So we spent our £4,000 on a 10-day yagya to sell the business. And of course anybody would do that, wouldn't they? So the first day of this 10-day ceremony, I got to the office and there was complete pandemonium. The computers had broken down and we were just about to launch a competition with the Daily Mirror to win a car and to do racing results. And I got into the office and the night watchman said somebody had driven into the forecourt and disconnected the computers early in the morning. He didn't realise what was going on. It was a BT van. It went in there and they started fiddling about. I got a call from the Daily Mirror and they said, we're cancelling your contract. Everybody's ringing in going berserk, and that was worth £3 million a year to us. So I did what anybody, normal person would do, and that is I asked my assistant Nina to make me a cup of tea, and we had an open plan office, and I sat underneath the desk and I said, don't talk to me again until I think of a way out of this mess. She's fine. Well, half an hour later, she says, I know what you said, but you should take this call. It's from a guy called Michael Hoy at the Times. Well, we had a tiny little racing contract with the Times, and I thought to myself, you know, they're going to give me a bollocking. But Michael Hoy says, would you like to sell your business? Sitting under the desk, cup of tea. Yeah, I guess I would. Why? He said, because Rupert Murdoch is looking for people like you to work in News Corporation, and if you're interested, you should meet a guy called John Evans in the Stafford Hotel, and he'll tell you, he'll get to know you a bit. So I said, okay. So it's 3 o'clock that afternoon. I start going there to Stafford Hotel. Computers are fixed. Meet John Evans, very eccentric guy, not really interested in what I did. But at the end of half an hour chat, he says, I think Rupert would like to meet you. Okay, it was Friday afternoon. I went home. I never expected to hear from him again. Get a call Sunday evening from John. Would you like to meet Rupert tomorrow at 10 o'clock? What are you doing? And I said, I'm taking my car in to be serviced. And I said, well, actually, I am taking my car in to be serviced, but I think I can sort that out. Next day, I met Rupert Murdoch with some of his executives, and we had a chat. He knew someone I knew, which was strange, and we'd done a deal. We did a deal then. He asked me for how much I wanted. I made up a figure. We did the deal, and he said, there's only one thing. I want to send 2 guys to come and see you tomorrow. I said, okay. And there we get to a really weird coincidence, because one of those guys was Rob Herzog, who was a founder of Adorium. Rob Herzog at the time was probably about 7, but he came with another guy and we got on, and he's the reason why News Corporation bought my business. And at first it was wonderful. You know, I had all the money I wanted. Murdoch put me on 10% of all the profit. I had all the newspapers and Sky and so on. And we made loads of money doing these interactive horoscopes and TV shows and so on and so forth. But we did a huge thing for the most eccentric person I've ever met was a guy called the late Bruce Gingell, who ran TV AM. And I met Bruce when he was bouncing up and down on his mini trampoline, just as they'd lost the franchise. And I was kind of like, hello, how are you doing? And Bruce said, we've just lost the franchise. Can you make some money for the shareholders? So I said, sure, if you do what I tell you, I'll give you a cheque for £1 million. You've got to give away a car on air. So he gave a car away on air, first time it ever been done. And I gave him a cheque for £1 million after 4 months, and we made £995,000. So there you go. However, after that, life got worse. I began to feel I was just working. Well, I don't know if any of you have seen Succession on Sky TV. Well, it's not about the Murdochs. It's got nothing to do with News Corporation. But there are, if you've seen it, and if you haven't seen it, have a look. There are certain aspects of working in a large corporation that were like Succession. And consequently, I got more and more unhappy. And at the end of my 3 years, then I lost my authenticity, quite honestly, and I began to emulate the values that I saw around me with my colleagues. And I made a drastic mistake, and my ego got in the way, and they offered me a deal where I had 30% of a joint venture company, and they told me, the CEO told me that I could do anything I wanted, and they'd back me. But about 4 weeks after he did that, he was fired. He was replaced by an interim CEO and then a permanent CEO, and they blocked every single thing that I wanted to do. But I was lucky because I'd become friends with Elizabeth Murdoch, who's Rupert's daughter, and she invited me out for a drink. And she didn't tell me, but she'd invited Rupert Murdoch along. And Rupert asked me how things were going. I said, dreadful. So he got his henchmen in the next day, and he met me in Wapping, and he told them to do this project with Sky TV that I'd thought about, which was called Sky Talk, which was a discounted telephony service, which I think is still going today. And we did that, and then again, it was almost like being in the Electricity Council, because I had 3 years of virtually doing nothing until eventually I got them to buy me out of the 30%. But by then I was feeling ill, and I'd been feeling ill for the 3 years that actually I'd done this joint venture. And after we'd done the deal to buy me out, and far too late, almost far too late, I got diagnosed with colon cancer. And I'm lucky to be alive. I mean, I think another maybe 6 months I wouldn't be here today. But I was cured from colon cancer, but I had to leave News Corporation. And despite what people think, they said to me, if you leave, we don't want you to leave, because if you don't leave and you die, we will look after your family for the rest of their lives. And they would have done that. So despite all the things you hear, they couldn't have done more for me, but I couldn't do it. I had to leave. So I left. And then I began to reinvent myself as the person that I would like to think I'd become. So I wasn't like that then. And I started to sit on the boards of various companies. Shine Television, which was Elizabeth Murdoch's production company, and the Ink Factory, which is John le Carré's family production company, and about eight technology companies. I did that for 10 years. And at the end, about 3 years ago, I decided to step back from business and just think about another direction, that I wanted to be of use to other people. At that point, I didn't know what to do. So I met Paul Bouros, who is over there, and he's my mentor, if you like. And Paul said that I should build a platform for myself. Well, I really didn't want to build a platform, because I'm not interested in social media particularly, and I'm very shy, as you can see. And I keep myself to myself. But I didn't have anything better to do. I wanted to do something good, but I didn't know what to do. So I started writing this book, and every time somebody said, what are you writing the book about? I'd say, well, I don't myself, I guess, but Paul told me to write it. Well, that was pretty pathetic. So then the idea came to me to give the money to charity, any royalties, and I decided, I was introduced to the Prince's Trust, and all the money from the book it goes to charity. I was approached by Peter Frith, who's over there, who approached me to publish the book, and he's giving all his royalties away to the Prince's Trust. And then I had the brainwave, well, I'm not that interesting, I'm fairly interesting, but on the other hand, if I want to talk about authenticity in business, I should find other people and hear their stories, because my basic philosophy is you don't have to do a business degree to get into business. That is something that destiny sends to you. It's not for everybody, but by looking at various stories of other people, you can decide whether business is your cup of tea or not. Particularly in this particular time, when lots of people will be out of work, will be looking at new ideas, and they want to look at whether they should be in business or not. So I began to interview people. There's 12 people in the book with all sorts of backgrounds, none of whom were thinking they were going to be in business, but all of them wandered into that field. There's Marcus, for instance, and there's Paul Bouros, and these people you know of. But there's also people, a woman called Monica Dodi, who was one of the founders of MTV in Europe. There's a woman called Tracy Gray, who worked on the space program before she got fired for putting up anti-government posters in her office. It reminds you of perhaps today, but this was many, many years ago. Somebody called Gail Kennedy, who was born in a displaced persons camp in Germany. She's about 74 now, and you would think she was, I don't know, 25. She started a cosmetic business because of a bet from her daughter, and she had absolutely no background. She's not even interested in business. Her husband does all that. So there's 12 people in there. All stories are different, but they all have one theme, which is that something happened to them out of the blue that took them in that general direction. And I hope also it will be of interest to people around the table, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But the point being that the book itself was really designed for people who are interested in business, and business is not for everyone, as you well know. So we're kind of indoctrinating now that everybody should be working for themselves, doing their own thing. It doesn't suit everybody. So this is to help younger people decide for themselves whether they want to go into business. But then I thought to myself, and I'm finishing now so we can all eat our scones in peace. I thought to myself, well, in fact, my wife Louisa said to me, no, you're missing a point here. You're talking to the Adorium Club. You're missing a point. I said, what's that? And she said, well, you've already told me that Rob Herzog was responsible for you being here. Then by accident, I met Marcus. And then I kind of thought, well, what is the message here? I'm supposed to be, she said, you should be taking them a message. And I said, I don't know what that message is. But then it came to me at night. And the message is that this is for you guys who are about authenticity, who are about being yourselves, who are about being compassionate, about helping others. It's an opportunity in a world which is fast changing, and I don't think we'll ever go back to how it was, to examine your own lives and to discover for yourself whether what you're doing suits your heart. Because one of the things that I learned in meditation, and we all can experience this, is that we have the mind, which is the intellectual capability, and the heart. And in this civilization today, we don't value what the heart tells us. We always tend to go for the logical approach. And I've learned the hard way that we should all be examining our heart. We all tell ourselves stories. So the story I would like to tell you to tell yourself, or to ask yourself actually, is am I doing what is best for me at this time? And only you know the answer to that. But that is the invitation from the universe to you today to consider. And with that, if there are any questions, not now because we've got to eat, but if there are any questions, I'm going to be over here, and you're always welcome to ask me a question, and I'll do my best to answer it. But goodbye. Thank you.